The lights stayed low to accommodate all the species. The envoys settled into their seats. Well over half the attendees wore environment suits tailored to their respective homeworlds. The Durgal wore a tiny meter-tall powered suit to fight against this world's higher gravity. The massive stone-like graphene carried hundreds of kilos of extra mass strapped to its suit like toadstools growing on a mossy log. The multi-limbed Horsk twitched in its environment suit at being in such an open room, while the lupine Valaka could barely contain its anxiety at being in so crowded of quarters. A dozen or more other species fought back their own primordial instincts to be in that room. "Your attention, please," the moderator, a tall, willowy Sukara with a surprisingly deep baritone voice, spoke. They were all translating into the commerce language. Primitive though it was, the commerce language was one in which all species could operate. The room slowly settled as predators and prey found their seats next to each other. The room was silent, save for the various whirs, clinks, grinds, and miscellaneous sounds from the environment suits. "Thank you," the moderator said. His pale skin and thin body reminded more than few attendees of deep water prey of their homeworlds. "We know why we have gathered. Humans!" A dull roar of approval and grumbling ascended from the assembled. There was much looking around at each member's neighbors to ensure everyone was suitably aligned. The moderator raised his lithe arm and ghostly hand for silence. "Yes," he said, "the scourge of these humans plague us all. They colonize on our sacred worlds, they sell our children useless trinkets, they show up at our hospices with their supposed medicine." Some species knocked on the tables to show their support, some species howled, and some stomped their feet. Regardless of the particulars, each envoy endorsed the moderator. "Bzzz! Point of order! Master Moderator, point of order!" A meter-tall Floy was trying to catch the moderator's attention. "We recognize the ambassador from Floy!" the moderator called, as the room pulled itself back into order. "Bzzzt! Thank you, Master Moderator," the Floy said. Its translator had a peculiar bark of static when it first started up. The Floy has always been at the edge of survivability, so luxuries like fully functional translators were few and far between. "Bzzzt! Master Moderator, we have all agreed to abide by the standard parliamentary procedures, even though this is a most irregular and ad hoc assemblage." "Spit it out!" the graphene delegate barked from under his massive weight adjuster. Yes," the much smaller Floy responded. "That is to say, as moderator, it is inappropriate for you to deliver such speeches, and we should table comments until old business has been disposed and new business has been addressed. This will give—" "Your comments are noted," the moderator said, his face held impassive. "The chair calls the esteemed representative of the Manchi Union for their report." The moderator sat down but kept an evil gaze locked on the Floa. "Thank you, Master Moderator," the Manchi representative said. She stood in place and addressed the crowd. "As the moderator said," she said, sparing a glance towards the Floy, "these humans have been troublesome to say the least. Their list of crimes and offenses surely needs no further iteration. Our union, along with support from more than a few of our brother races, began a campaign of harassment against these vermin. First, a number of their outlying colonies went missing, shall we say?" The Manchi representative grinned at a few of her co-conspirators. "Second, one of their largest colonies, called something horrible in that brutish tongue of theirs, was the victim of a most unfortunate asteroid collision. Total loss of the colony. Quite a shame that their early warning systems were so primitive that they simply overlooked a flying mountain crashing into their world." Another conspiratorial smirk and glance around the room. She continued, "Finally, nearly every species represented here has their own undesirable elements in some fashion or another. We have coordinated seemingly random attacks on human shipping lanes. If they were to investigate, all they would find is a series of unconnected piracy attacks. Life away from whatever damp mud puddle spawned them may simply be too much for them." The room was overcome with a brief moment of laughing or laugh analogues from the member species. The Manchi representative let the adulation wash over her. Her superiors would hear of this, of the glory she brought to the Union and to their house, and she would be rewarded. A palace, at least. dozens of servants, respect among the council, and all for destroying this new and insignificant race. In that instant, she knew she was the luckiest being alive. "Well done, Manchi Union," the moderator said. "With your talents leading and organizing our efforts, we have no doubt the human menace will be eradicated before the next great turn." A round of applause swept the auditorium, and the Manchi Union representative could fairly feel her face glow with pride. "Bzzzt! Point of order, Master Moderator." The troublesome Floy had spoken up once again before the applause had even died out. The moderator bit back 100 devastating retorts and simply nodded to the gadfly. "Bzz. We are heartily gladdened by the Manchi Union's efforts and results in dealing with this, as you call it, human menace. But we of the Floy feel compelled to request, under what authority did these events transpire? We were made aware of no call to council, and we have seen no minutes which indicate a quorum was attained before debate engaged. We ask for the— Enough! The moderator's voice rebounded off the far walls. "We have been more than patient with the delegate from Floy, but enough is enough. We will not be mired in procedures and paperwork. The humans pose a real and continuing threat to every species here. This is not the time to succumb to formalities. Besides, we're not even that dangerous," a small voice from the rear of the assembly said in the sudden quiet. Every head and sensory organ turned to see who had spoken. A Vresh in its fully sealed environment suit sat patiently as the room turned to face it. A moment later, the Vresh stood up, and the environment suit shed the outermost layer, revealing a much thinner bipedal mammal underneath, its face looking out through the transparent faceplate. "Thank you for coming together like this," the new speaker said. "It cuts down on the travel time when we can all talk together at once. My name is Sarah, and I'm a human." The room erupted into shouts and commands. Some weapons appeared on or near the appendages of several delegates. Recriminations and blame flew through the air like dust in a tornado. Each delegate looked from one to another in fear, in anger, and confusion. They all wanted answers and reassurance. "Order! Order!" the moderator shouted. The human stood with her hands folded in front of her, watching the assembly decay. She counted at least a dozen weapons aimed at her, and she assumed at least that many more were unrecognizable. "Sergeant-at-Arms, take this human into custody," the moderator ordered. "Make sure it doesn't have any tricks or weapons." "I'd like to address the group," Sarah said. She heard flicks and whines from weapons. Subtlety shifted as they prepared to fire. "Address? You wish to speak?" The moderator's shock carried over through every translation. "Yes, I do," Sarah said. "You all came together to destroy my people, and I'd like a chance to speak for us." "Master Moderator," the Floy envoy said, "parliamentary procedures dictate that—" Yes, the moderator said. His eyes stayed locked on the human, and the Floy with its procedures was less of an annoyance than only a few minutes ago. The moderator stared at the human. His brain was still trying to wrap itself around the idea of a human being here, much less that it wanted to speak. After several moments, the moderator said, "Very well, human. You may speak, though your life may still be forfeit after." "Thank you, Master Moderator," Sarah said. She tried to put a pleasant look on her face, but was worried how each species would interpret it, so she kept her teeth showing to a minimum and didn't hold eye contact too long. "First, we would like to apologize for any misunderstandings that may have arisen. We honestly were only trying to be good neighbors. As I'm sure you all know, humans have not been off our homeworld for very long, so this is all quite new to us. And so I offer our most sincere and humble apologies. If you don't want our aid or manufactured goods, we will absolutely stop them." The weapons hadn't lowered, but they also hadn't fired. Sarah considered this a win for the moment and pressed forward. "Second, while I'm sure the delegate from the Manchi Union," the Floy representative said. "Seriously?" Sarah asked. "Okay, the delegate from the Monkey Union said they had launched a few hidden attacks on us. It was due to those attacks that we eventually found out about this gathering. We did lose communications with a few colonies. Someone had sabotaged a comms relay. Whoever it was apparently didn't know a great deal about technology. I'm told we had communications restored in 6 hours. Sarah made it a point to not glance at the Manchi Union representative as she spoke. Sarah continued on. The asteroid that the delegate spoke of was quite the disaster. The outpost, not a full colony, was evacuated 2 weeks before impact. The only things left behind were a few automated monitoring systems. I'm told that data has opened up a dozen new lines of inquiry in geology, planetology, plate tectonics, and a handful of other sciences. Whether or not it was a natural phenomenon, the asteroid strike on a minor outpost turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Sarah thought she caught the hum of whispered conversation at the edge of the assembly, but ignored it. While she had their attention, she intended to milk it for all she could. Finally, the piracy attacks. Yes, we had noticed an uptick in attempted robberies, which is why our merchant vessels were immediately given military escorts when traveling through troubled areas. Those of you who sent ships to harass our shipping lanes, I would ask if you've heard from them recently. A few of the weapons were beginning to drop and drift away from targeting Sarah. Their attention was on her words. So, she said, we are happy to work with each and every one of you for mutually beneficial agreements, including simply leaving you alone. However, we will not allow our people to be attacked. I want to be very clear about this. We are not looking for a war. We don't want to have to firebomb your colonies. We don't relish the thought of dropping antimatter pods on your homeworlds. We don't want to sterilize your farmlands with X-ray lasers. We don't want to kill an entire generation of your people. Sarah let her words hang in the air for a moment. We want to be your friends, but if we are to be enemies, know that we have invented forms of warfare for which do not even have the words. Again, we apologize for any offense we may have given. The assembly stared at her, and the weapons slowly lowered.